Hi, this is Naroki5. I am going to be doing this until I die or I find something better to do. So please help me achieve this personal and, I think, noble objective by contributing to my Patreon or Subscribestar. Link is down below. Every little bit helps. Thank you very much.
The problem you have, and by the way, this is Naroki5, and I'm dealing with yet another intellectual, and I'm saying that raising both of my arms and putting up the ditto signs, intellectual feminist here. So, the whole video is going to be chock full of interruptions, because when you're dealing with and by the way, even though this woman I don't think she actually says during the whole video that she is a feminist, but she quite clearly is one. I've been to her I've been to her YouTube page and I've seen her stuff. She very clearly gets a lot of stuff. It's stuff from, I'm going to have to say it, from feminist sources, because once again, just like Mooncat, I mean, she goes and says stuff about the Manosphere that, like, literally, that anybody who has done any amount of research, who has been involved in the Manosphere for any period of time, even a feminist or somebody who's done a lot of research, would know that is literally just not true. However, right, the problem with a quote-unquote intellectual feminist is that, I mean, they paint over their misandry, or they paint over the fact that they hate the Manosphere or that they hate men, and they give it a nice intellectual veneer. In her case, what she's trying to do here is she's going at it via evolutionary psychology, and I mean, yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride. So sit back, enjoy, and I have to apologize. This is probably going to be a fairly long video because I'm going to have to interrupt at multiple points to make my point here. That's the issue with intellectual feminists, is like you have to like literally go in, because it's like the way intellectual feminists work is that they will go in and they will misrepresent or twist a fact around, or take something that a person says and take it out of context, and they will throw in snark. You'll notice things. I mean, pay attention to the background music, right? Like, the background music is specifically designed to mock the subject that she's talking about, which kind of gives you an idea of what the type of individual we're dealing with here. Anya Turnbull likes to think that she's smart, and she probably is, but it's very clear where she was getting all her information from, and that will be demonstrated throughout my response to her. Keep in mind, too, I am not a scientist, and I'm not overly familiar with evolutionary psychology. The fact that she chose to use evolutionary psychology as the basis for what she's talking about, again, right, she clearly did not do her research. At least she didn't bother to do any research into the actual Manosphere, because there's a lot of stuff that she got wrong. But anyway, let's just get this party started.
Evolutionary psychology.
Mating strategies across the sexes.
Emotional display of dominance.
Evolution, you cuck!
Because women are weaker, feebler, don't have the same coordination, they don't have the same prowess, ability to create things. This is all scientifically proven.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but you've evolved to be a whore.
That's literally not what any of them said. That's you, Anya, implying that's what they said. I mean, we're only a few seconds in, and you're already off on the wrong foot. But yeah, let's continue.
Today we're going to talk about the way people use evolutionary psychology to fight feminism and women's rights.
No, Anya, it is not used to fight feminism and women's rights. Evolutionary psychology is used to explain female nature and to explain some of the issues that women do in regards to men and how the current social dynamic evolved. It is not used to fight feminists or women's rights, because I mean, if you had actually bothered to do research, and I know you didn't, you would have known that there are various sects within sects, groups, factions within the Manosphere, and not all of them agree on anything at all. On much at all. And again, evolutionary psychology is used to explain female nature and how social dynamics between the two genders work, and how they worked back in the hunter-gatherer days versus how effective they are now. You see, in your probably indoctrinated brain, anything that intrinsically helps men in any way is going to be anti-female. Specifically, and again, I know you're going to probably try and twist this around, but you know what? I really don't care. Anything that basically helps men counter feminist propaganda is also going to be seen as inherently anti-female. But the only thing is that feminists chose to take this fight up with us.
Hi, hello. My name's Anya, and I'm happy you're here. My backdrops have been changing in every video lately. That's because I've been moving around a lot. Currently, I'm in Georgia, the country, not the state. I'm in the capital, Tbilisi, and I really love it here. Evolutionary psychology, or EvoPsych for short, looks at people's behaviors through the lens of natural and sexual selection. The key idea is that there were certain behaviors that helped our ancestors survive and reproduce. So we have evolved to have strong drives towards those same behaviors.
And this is science. I mean, in a way.
Kind of ironic that you picked Joe Rogan as as the clip to do this. Well, I can tell you right straight up, Joe Rogan is not a member of the Manosphere. In fact, he has openly said that he's open to having pretty much anybody come on his show. And considering the fact that your other channel has 1.5 million subs, I don't see you making any attempt to try to get on his show. I haven't seen any feminists at all attempting to try to get on a show, even though I think Joe Rogan would probably allow, say, you or Gloria Steinem or some of these other feminists onto his show, but you never bothered to try. But I mean, you certainly don't have any problem taking a small few-second clip of his content and using it potentially out of context.
So, for example, someone who's into EvoPsych might say, it's natural for men to want to sleep with a lot of women because in the past, this maximized their chance of leaving offspring. Which, by the way, no judgment here, nothing wrong with sleeping around responsibly. Get out there, kings.
Just giving you a heads up here, this next caption that you're seeing, the hypocrite one, I'm not fully familiar. Like I say, I only have been through this particular video once before, as I'm kind of doing this off the cuff. I have an aching feeling, given the known hypocrisy of feminists, though you're probably going to be seeing a lot of this. And in this particular case, where is the hypocrisy here? Well, when you get to the end of it, you'll hear her chastise males for engaging in this behavior. In the meantime, she's perfectly willing to accept that women are able to do this type of thing. Yeah, just going to point that out, giving you a heads up again. You're probably going to be seeing a lot of this particular shot throughout the video.
But it is a little silly to use EvoPsych to justify your own horn dog fantasies.
What horn dog fantasies would those be, Anya? In the whole time that I've been, and I mean, keep in mind here, I don't listen to the PUA dating coaches a whole lot. I have not seen them even in, well, I mean, I guess if you look through enough content and you look through enough of them, you'll find them. But I mean, I have not heard any of the major content producers start talking about sexual fantasies and horn dog fantasies. That seems to be more of a feminist thing, which, considering the source we're talking about here, isn't a surprise.
This might look like a woman doing her job, but observe, she has reddened her lips. This is done to simulate sexual arousal. This is clearly a female on the hunt for a high-value mate.
No, that is not literally how they sound. What you're doing here is you're taking what I believe is called indicators of interest, and you are twisting the meaning around, or you're attempting to straw man or take something that is said one way and projecting it out as another. That is otherwise known as the straw man fallacy, Anya. That is literally not what that is. Indicators of interest are, that is not how you represent indicators of interest. Okay? Like, that is just you strawmanning and projecting. Consider it called.
EvoPsych is not a popular field, and if you read EvoPsych books, you will have noticed that the authors are really butthurt about this. Why do social sciences not play with us? Why are feminists so mean to us? Nobody gets it.
I'm really starting to think there's this feminist website somewhere where all of this information is available. I love how you just post this stuff up and say it without actually giving any sources. But then again, given what I've seen out of feminists so far, this is par for the course. Again, right? You don't cite any. You don't cite any sources. You don't give any sources. You just post up a bunch of words with a couple of highlights in there. Very weak methodology on your part. Oh, by the way, and just as a side note, if you go over and look at the stuff that Mooncat did when she did her quote unquote special on the Manosphere, you'll notice that they're actually when they're attacking the Manosphere, they actually use very similar background music, and I talked about this at the start.
Yes. EvoPsych does have methodological issues, and it's not especially verifiable because knows what our ancestors were up to 100,000 years ago. But despite this, we lay people are deep in the EvoPsych paradigm. Think about it. Everyone is constantly talking about things that are instinctive or that we're hardwired to do or how we're programmed to be this way, built to do that. Just throwing around all these assumptions about what's supposed to be part of our nature.
I'm not a scientist, but I am familiar with the concept of the scientific method. So, something like evolutionary psychology or even evolutionary biology or any science, you have to come up with an observation, a hypothesis, and you have to actually do, actual research. Like the hypothesis is the guess, but you actually have to do the research. And then, by the way, that research has to be peer-reviewed before you're allowed to publish it, Anya. So, in particular, with a department like psychology, which is incredibly highly feminized, you have to basically walk a tightrope when you're doing this stuff. Jordan Peterson has, to my knowledge, over 100 papers published, or very close, 100 give or take. So, you don't get published that many times by just quote-unquote throwing around wild theories, Anya. You don't get published that often. You don't get tenureship. You don't get a psychiatry license or a psychology license or a psychology degree by throwing around quote-unquote random crazy theories. You actually have to do the research. Research is not throwing around crazy, wild ideas. That is not how the scientific method works.
There's two reasons I wanted to make this video. One is that EvoPsych, unfortunately, is a legitimizer of misogyny. It is the book-lined lobby of the woman hater hotel.
I had a feeling I was going to be bringing up the straw man again. Right? Explaining current gender dynamics and human behavior to men in order for them to understand women better does not equate to misogyny. Yeah, a lot of it does come out of evolutionary psychology, but it is not the only thing that's out there to explain it all. And to say that it's the basis of online misogyny, it's the online basis of misogyny how, specifically? Again, I don't expect you to answer this because, I've noticed that people like you never do. But, we're going to be getting into Laura Bates here in just a second. So, it's going to get even better.
Laura Bates is a writer and researcher of online misogyny, and here's how she put it in an interview with Jon Favreau.
There's a lot of quite kind of scientific language that's mixed up in there as well. They want to create this idea that this is a really kind of scientific, in-depth worldview, when the reality is, of course, that it is just based on extreme misogyny.
That section right there, the one that she picked out, Laura Bates, that was the thing that actually caused me to want to actually do this. Laura Bates, and in fact, I will be loading up the video before, Laura Bates will never debate her critics. Before this one, to make the point, Laura Bates is a woman. She reminds me a lot of Anita Sarkeesian and a few other feminists. They're really good at staying in their own space in doing a talk, or they will go into high schools, or they will go into elementary schools, or they will go into places where the boys or the men are not particularly knowledgeable or agreeable or male feminists or whatever, and then they will make their statements and whatever, right? But I mean, Laura Bates, and I did actually go and do a Google search. Laura Bates has never put any of her concepts up to scrutiny. She has never, ever debated or even attempted to have a discussion with a member from the Manosphere at any point in time at all, which is a very common trait with women like Anya Turnbull and Laura Bates. And the fact that she used Laura Bates as a source, I mean, I could literally end this video right here and go, yeah, she's using Laura Bates as an example. Period. End of story. We can just dismiss anything else that she has to say at this point. But I mean, again, right, when it comes to feminists, I have noticed that unless you actually come at them with overwhelming evidence that they're wrong, they will attempt to brush off what you have to say and get dismissive about it, because it's easier to just dismiss one point. But when you come at them with a whole battery of points and you keep firing them at them, getting snarky and dismissive tends to not work very well, right? Like, you can't snark your way out of, say, like what I did when I confronted this one woman on Twitter who actually had the gall to post up an article saying that misandry doesn't exist. So when I posted up about a dozen quotes from hateful feminists quite clearly demonstrating that misandry does exist, which got me blocked, which I consider a good thing. If I do not continue to completely and utterly defeat this argument and just keep coming in hard with the facts and debunk every single point that Anya is trying to make here, specifically the one with Laura Bates, she will attempt to just brush this off. The fact, I'm just going to say it though right straight out here, the fact that she used Laura Bates, a woman who quite clearly has never put any of her concepts up to scrutiny and got seriously butthurt, by the way, when she actually started, even in high schools, when she started bringing this up at high school, she started getting confronted about it. She started getting butthurt about it, right? Doesn't say a lot about you, Anya. But then again, having seen both of your YouTube page channels, I'm not overly surprised.
The other reason I wanted to make this video is that I myself am unironically interested in evolutionary psychology, and that bothers me. Evo-psych tells me things I don't necessarily want to believe are true, but that I don't find easy to dismiss. And there's plenty of very anti-women public intellectuals who can make pretty substantial points using Evo-psych. Let's take Jordan Peterson, for example. If you don't know who this is, he used to be a professor and a psychologist, and now he's a very famous public intellectual who writes self-help books for men.
Jordan Peterson, when he wrote 12 Rules for Life, he did not in any point, and I know because I've been through the book a couple of times now, and not because I'm a fanboy of Jordan Peterson either, by the way. Jordan Peterson at no point in his book specifically points out that 12 Rules for Life is exclusively, in fact, I've heard him say on an interview that 12 Rules for Life is not exclusively for men and boys. It does appeal to men and boys more, but there have been women that have also said they benefit a lot out of it. And to claim that he wrote the Hallmark book for misogyny, clearly you obviously never even attempted to read Jordan Peterson's book, which isn't, given who I'm talking about here, Anya Turnbull, isn't that much of a surprise. But also, I'm also going to point one other thing out here before I actually get into I'm going to read off all 12 of these rules for life. Because once again, it is necessary for me to absolutely come in with the sledgehammer and the scalpel and tear this thing apart and just smash it to pieces here. Jordan Peterson does not actually consider himself to be a member of the Manosphere. In fact, he has said stuff that is actually rather antagonistic towards the Manosphere. So which one is it, Anya? Is he a member of the Manosphere or is he not a member of the Manosphere? It's one or the other. And it's sort of to say that he's a leading figure of misogyny and a leading figure in the Manosphere is not true, because Jordan Peterson is not a member of the Manosphere. He never has been a member of the Manosphere. He wrote a book that a lot of people in the Manosphere have found quite helpful, but he is not a member of the Manosphere. But, since you love taking Jordan Peterson, using Peterson as an example, for instance, and saying that he's an example of misogyny, I'm just going to read off all 12 rules of life for you, Anya. And to the people who are listening to this. And, yeah, do feel free at any point to point out in the comments below where exactly misogyny fits in. So, yeah, here you go. The 12 rules for life, Anya. 12 rules for life. 1. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. 2. Treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping. 3. Befriend people who want the best for you. 4. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. 5. Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. 6. Set your house in order before you criticize the world. 7. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. 8. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. 9. Assume whoever you're listening knows something you don't. 10. Be precise in your speech. 11. Do not bother children while they are skateboarding. 12. Pet a cat when you encounter it on the street. So, yeah, Anya, do tell. Where is the misogyny in any of those points? I'd love to hear it. Like, where in 12 Rules for Life does he specifically attack women? I mean, he talks about the issues that boys have to go through, but again, men and boys talking about their issues is not misogyny. No matter how many times you like to say it is, Anya. I'm fully expecting that you're never going to actually answer this question, because, I mean, for you to actually have to answer that question about the 12 rules for life, the only way you'd be able to answer that would be to actually attack me or my style or something about me. You do because I've noticed that feminists will do this, social justice warriors will do this quite frequently. They will do anything other than address the point. I have no reason to believe that you won't be any different, Anya.
In one of his podcasts, Jordan Peterson had Dr. David Buss on, who's like top lobster of the field of EvoPsych, and together they managed to basically blame women for everything that men have done to women throughout history. The argument goes something like this. Due to the metabolic cost of pregnancy, women have an innate preference for men with resources. Therefore, it is in fact female-driven sexual selection that led to men having a disproportionate amount of power and resources throughout civilized history and to this day. Women chose the patriarchy, actually. Women chose for men to have all the things.
The guy you're looking at in this photo, his name is Harvey Weinstein. If you don't know who this is, you've obviously been living under a rock, or you were never in the media of any form or capacity. Because even people who weren't in Hollywood had heard of Harvey Weinstein. Miramax Entertainment. Harvey Weinstein. And you can tell from the photo, not anywhere remotely considered attractive. Well, not allegedly. He's been found guilty. He sexually assaulted numerous women in Hollywood for damn near a quarter of a century, probably over a quarter of a century before he was finally caught and tossed in prison, and justifiably so. Despicable individual by any stretch of the imagination, an absolutely, utterly despicable individual. Here's the thing. Hollywood remained mute, silent about this guy for 25 years. I mean, I have to mention that some women maybe reported him, and they used some of their other Hollywood contacts to prevent that Weinstein didn't harass them. But this guy persisted for 25 years before he finally got caught. You take a look at this guy's photo. Is this guy a classically attractive individual? No, he is not. Given that, would a guy like this, based on, if this was just a normal everyday guy making say $40,000 a year, how many women would even give this guy the time of day? Not very many, to be honest with you. Not very many at all. And his game, by the way, he had no game. I mean, his game consisted of inviting an actress up to his room, go into the bathroom, come out naked, and say, "Sleep with me and I'll give you the part." That was his game. He had no game of any kind. I'm not just going to do that. I'm going to actually I pulled this out for Fresh and Fit. The woman that you're going to see in this particular, and I'm using her as an example because of her absolute and utter hypocrisy. She is in an open relationship with a YouTuber named Destiny, and she is sitting there denying that Destiny's status had anything to do with the reason why she is with him, even though, and this is an actual proven fact because I actually think this actually happened live on YouTube. She dumped her previous boyfriend to go and be with Destiny, and Destiny had more status, more money, and she's sitting there in this interview, and I'm choosing Melina in this particular case because, I mean, as much as I dislike Anya Turnbull, I find Melina to be absolutely and utterly repugnant as a person. And Melina, if you ever hear this, any opinion you have about men in the Manosphere, I mean, you know what the fucking feeling towards you is fucking likewise. Seriously, like it's fucking likewise. And if this flies in the face of everything that Anya is trying to say about, oh, well, it's all misogyny and women don't choose status. And this is something that, in particular, feminists love to deny. And yet, for instance, if you go over and you look at magazines, you find most desirable male, whatever, you'll notice this. But anyway, you know what? I will let Melina's actions and what she's saying do the talking for her.
Yeah, but at some point, if he lived in his parents' basement, I don't care how smart he is, you're not going to accept that.
Yeah, but in that case, you clearly have like a problem that you're not like, you're in that case depressed or something. You don't have a drive in your life. Like you're not doing anything.
So that would be unattractive.
But it doesn't mean that someone, it doesn't mean that you need to make millions. Like it doesn't mean that at all. Just like if you have a passion,
the reality is you left the guy that you were with before for Destiny because Destiny had more status, he had more clout. If we're going to be all the way 1,000 here, this is what I mean. This is what I mean when women say and I need the audience to really understand this, right? Like besides looking at the girls and be like, oh my god, blah blah blah. I think men need to really really understand and drill this in their head that women are going to say things that are politically correct to kind of massage and or
You're just
conceal.
Not. Is there anything I could say to change your mind?
Let him
Well, I was talking too.
Yeah, my point is this, women are going to say certain things, but they're going to do opposite things because if women were honest about the way that they actually mate select, it would be very bad and make them look very poor and terrible people because women typically do monkey branch to better guys. And your own mating practices have proven what I'm saying, that you went to a better guy that you had, and you did it overtly on a camera. Let's be honest here. If we're going to be 1,000.
So there's absolutely nothing that I could say to change your mind to believe what I actually feel.
But what I'm saying is that Destiny was able to take you from that male because he was better in some regard.
Not because of his money and not because of his success.
He had more potential. Remember I said the whole shovel thing? Maybe he had a smaller shovel at that point, or you had a smaller shovel at that point, but you saw the potential and you're like, you know what? I can invest with this guy.
That's not how I felt at all, though.
Okay. Well,
I just got to throw this one little factor in before we continue on with the show. I love nothing better than to debunk a bullshit feminist with the actual words and actions of another woman who holds the absolute manosphere in contempt. I mean, I actually had to stop and glow in the joy of the victory of that particular moment immensely. Back to the show.
The conclusion is bananas, but the argument itself is easy to follow and seems to make sense. That's why this topic is so important, because there's so many men and women and girls and boys out there who don't think of themselves as sexist, but who still believe these ideas. And so they end up falling into the, well, misogyny is all just biology kind of trap. I had a comment on a video a long time ago where someone said, Mother Nature is the true misogynist.
Remember when I said that would probably be using the hypocrisy photo again? Well, I've used the straw man photo twice, but yeah, I'm going to use the hypocrisy one again, and also the one on unconscious bias. Trying to claim all of this stuff about all of these facts about, say, evolutionary psychology, while at the same time pulling up another area of psychology, unconscious bias, and trying to pass that off. And by the way, unconscious bias has got a huge amount of holes in it. I'm not going to get into all of them right now because, again, I'm not overly familiar with the actual intellectual concept of unconscious bias. But there are a large number of holes. Basically, the first and foremost of those is, how the hell do you even prove that? For one, how can you have a bias if you're not even fucking aware of it? She's using an area that has got very where she says that there's questionable very science behind it is and therefore it is not true, and that the Manosphere is wrong because they're using evolutionary biology, but feminism is perfectly legit and right and in the clear for using a concept like unconscious bias that also has a significant number of holes in it. I'm just going to let that one sit there for you. And yeah, that's what she was trying to do here. She was using unconscious bias. So yeah, you're going to see both of those up in the video feed. Oh, and one other thing. I'm also going to point this out again. I think this is the third time I pointed this out. You'll notice that whenever she's trying to mock the Manosphere at any time, or trying to discredit the Manosphere of any kind, like, she's noticed the music that she's got in the background again. Just, it's probably a little bit late, but yeah, she had that kind of mocking music in the background again. Just thought I'd bring that up for you.
Well, this video is about proving that no, in fact, the true misogynists are the misogynists, okay? And they need to start taking some responsibility. Not blame, necessarily, but responsibility. This video explains why evolutionary psychology doesn't predict us and doesn't even describe us. Except it does help you figure out if your female coworkers are sending you sexual signals.
You should also check if she's wearing heels. Females sometimes do this to tilt their pelvises, suggesting readiness to copulate.
Again, with the goddamn straw man. Literally, we're not blaming you, but you need to take responsibility. So yeah, in fact, we are blaming you. And then she goes back and she pulls that same straw man video from the start of her video and uses that. Again, right? Yeah, I'm noticing a trend here, and the thing is that I'm only halfway through at this point. I have a feeling this is going to be another one of those exhausting ones where it's just like, you go through, and by the end of it, it's like, oh, thank God, I'm done with the dishonesty of this person.
Part 1, the crisis.
Something ominous is happening to men in America.
And men are falling behind by every single metric.
Why are men in such crisis? I mean,
there certainly is a crisis of masculinity. Women are allowed to do so many of the things that only men could do before, that the definition of what it means to be a man is becoming less and less clear.
So this is where the MGTOW content starts with this. One of the things that MGTOW will talk about when it comes to women is that even when it's not about them, they will make it about them. And that's literally what she's doing here. It's sort of like, no, this issue doesn't involve you. And it also certainly doesn't involve you in regards to a lot of the other issues, which I will get into. But I mean, yeah, this is a MGTOW concept from the Manosphere, where even the quote-unquote male crisis, which there is, it's not about the men. It's about the women. That's one of those. This is another one of those bullshit feminist
masculinity
statements.
Is being redefined. But conservative pundits seem to think that what we need to do in America, at least, is rewind to 1950, when it was easier for men to feel good about themselves, allegedly.
You're tearing me apart!
Whereas I think this crisis is a good thing. It's a crisis of growth. It's growing pains. To illustrate this point, I wanted to use a clip from a movie where a guy is transforming into something else and the process is painful. It turns out most of the scenes like this, the guy is turning into a monster, which seems ominous. And if you look online, it seems like the transformation of masculinity is going very poorly. It's going in the monster direction.
You hear that, folks? A feminist has decided that masculinity is something that she gets to define. even though, I mean, in no form or fashion, at least with very, very rare exceptions, have I seen a woman actually own up and take responsibility for the actions of the other women around her. But somehow I have to take responsibility for every other fucking man around me. You know what? Fuck that shit, Anya. You know what? Masculinity is not something you get to define, and you sure as fuck don't get to tell a MGTOW what a man is. So fuck off. Oh, and FYI, a 5-second clip out of the now hundreds of thousands of hours of content done by men in the Manosphere does not prove a fucking point. It just doesn't.
Fuck the woman! Fuck the woman! What?
Part of Laura Bates's job is going into schools to talk to kids about things like consent and equality. And she says,
and a few years ago, there was a real shift in the attitudes of the young people I was working with, particularly young men who were coming to sessions with some real misinformation that was quite deeply ingrained. So they were coming out with, feminism is an anti-men conspiracy theory. The gender pay gap is a myth. Me Too is a witch hunt. Good men are losing their jobs. White men are the real oppressed minority these days, and so on.
First of all, what Kathy Bates was doing was not work. That was indoctrination. And what she was starting to encounter is something that you're starting to see more and more of as the teenage... I mean, first of all, let's just get into the bottom line here. It's like literally every man in the West right now knows a guy that is going and is getting royally screwed over in a divorce by their ex, or is involved in a toxic relationship, or has had some type of an accusation thrown against them as something for whatever reason. And there has been, with very rare exception, there has been little to no consequences for the women that are doing it. But yeah, no, we blame feminism for that. No, it's the actions of women in general that are doing that. And it's like, to assume that this also doesn't I mean, once a boy hits probably about 8, 9, 10 years old, they develop independent thinking facilities, and they're able to start putting things together. They're able to figure out that 2 + 2 = 4, and they're seeing what's going on, and they're seeing that it's not just happening to them. That they become aware of it's a little bit more than just themselves. So they become aware that it's more than just themselves, and they become aware that it's not just them. It's happening to the other boys that they're in school with, and yet they're going online and they're seeing, which is, by the way, why they're so keenly desperate in a lot of countries, and specifically, I mean, I can tell you in Britain at one point, they literally tried to make it against the law to challenge feminism online. No, I wish I was making that up, but I'm not. So what Kathy Bates was running into is that, I mean, the information is out there, and these boys were getting a hold of it in her indoctrination sessions, in which previously up to that point had been pretty much going unchallenged because the boys didn't have the information. Suddenly they did have the information, and if the boy is reasonably functioning and sane, doesn't come from a dysfunctional work environment, or even has, say, perhaps, and she's going to encounter even more of this, where the boys know somebody who's involved in the Manosphere is telling them this stuff, right? And in comes Kathy Bates, a dishonest woman who has never allowed herself to be opened up to scrutiny from members of the Manosphere at any point. Comes in, so she's getting, I mean, she can't even, without freaking out, she can't even handle blowback from boys in their early teens without spurging out. And yeah, keep in mind here, Anya is using this person as an example. And this is
not bitter, divorced neckbeards saying this. These are teenage boys. The kids are, in fact, not all right.
So a guy that gets absolutely shafted over the divorce and is more or less put into a position of indentured servitude is a bitter divorced Nick Beard. And he's not a individual who hasn't had a grave injustice done to him and is angry and frustrated and feeling like he's just been jacked over by the system. Oh, no, this guy's a pathetic loser who's angry and bitter. You know what, Anya?
The YouTuber Sean did a really good job of describing the backdrop to this crisis.
Now, I'm going to say something relatively cruel, kind of an uncomfortable truth that I need to be careful about expressing. For dudes who just suck, like they're not particularly interesting or funny or kind or successful, for men who just don't have much to offer a woman, well, they used to be able to offer an income. They could at least be providers at a time when it was more difficult for a woman to provide for herself. However, with the advancement of women's rights in a lot of places over the last century, with women being able to go into higher education and work a wider range of jobs, gaining the ability to divorce husbands they don't like and so on, as well as it becoming increasingly acceptable to be unmarried later in life, there's simply less financial and social pressure on women to settle for men who just aren't very good.
This one is among the easiest to debunk because, I mean, what feminists are claiming is that men are getting angry and frustrated because women are taking away their rights and women have equal access. And because women have equal access, men who are just shitty human beings can't get women anymore. So it's only, and by implication, this is what they're doing. By implication, it is only the shitty males that are not getting partnered up. And of course, it's the women that get to define what a poor quality male is. It's not up to the man to decide that, right? But of course, we'll talk about the whole list of topics here. Open discrimination against men, the fact that men are the overwhelming recipients of violent crime, the fact that, males are treated like throwaways, the issue around genital mutilation and forced circumcision, prison rape of men, false accusations of both rape and stalking, domestic violence committed by women against men, forced conscription and forced drafting, lack of reproductive rights, lack of medical and educational opportunities, parental rights and abortion, no-fault divorce. They call it sperm theft, but it's otherwise known as paternity fraud, reverse sexism, and the fact that masculinity is taught as, in a lot of places, is, including the American the APA, the American Psychological Association, has a recommendation of masculinity as being inherently toxic. But yeah, you know what? It's only about the fact that it's just the shitty guys that are being left out, and they're angry and they're frustrated and they're bitter and they're acting out and they're blaming feminism and they're blaming you because it's always about you, right? I could get into all of these topics, but just having listened to what this Sean idiot has been talking to you about for the last few minutes and listing off all of these issues. And here's the thing, right? I'm at Wikipedia right now. I'm looking at all these topics. And they've changed. Things like discrimination against men for being white and male. And the fact that they have changed paternity fraud into sperm theft. And they don't get into reproductive rights. And one of the big ones on here is false accusation of stalking. Like that one is at least that's one that I've run into quite frequently. But no. It's all about the women. And again, it's not that there's an issue going on. No. The men are just frustrated and we're just breeding out all the losers. And it's sort of like, the very fact that you even have that as a concept, or even attempting to push that as a concept, is a form of misandry. It's not about you, Anya. None of the topics that I just mentioned are about you. None of these topics that I just mentioned have anything to do with men. In fact, a lot of the guys that that are going through nasty child custody. But a lot of these are very decent, hard-working, earnest males whose only crime is the fact that they married the wrong woman perhaps too early and are paying for it. The rest of the life. Oh yeah, I noticed that lifetime alimony isn't there. See, they've taken that one right off the list. And child custody cases, that one's been taken off the list too. So, but yeah, oh no. It's all about frustrated loser males that can't get laid and can't get a woman. It's like, I really don't know what to say about this. Just, I mean, it took me all of about 40 seconds to find a list to debunk what you just posted up there, Anya. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. So if I got into the issues, I'd be here for an hour.
Maybe what Sean is saying here sounds harsh, but Manosphere influencers actually have pretty similar explanations for the problems men are facing. It's just their wording is much worse, and they're angry.
15. A man's money now means nothing to women, as they can instead either work for themselves or rely on the government to provide resources instead.
The government is copying men.
I think this is the second time I've said this, an 11-second clip without the context around it. And also, I noticed that you went to the Black Pill community for that one. Out of the hundreds of thousands of hours, like an 8-second clip does not prove your point. I could easily dredge up really toxic stuff from feminists, what they've been saying about men, and it would be a whole lot more than 8 seconds.
The point is, the thesis is the same. Progress in women's rights made it harder to get a girlfriend. By the way, in case you don't know, the Manosphere is basically the online world of male discontent. It includes various communities like incels, self-designated involuntarily celibate men, pickup artists, men's rights activists, and influencers like bro-y podcasters, idiot self-help gurus, conservative pundits, pick-me women, and would-be philosophers.
Kind of pointed out a couple, actually several things wrong with what she just said here. First of all, by extension, what she tried to do here is that she tried to say that MGTOW and incel is the same thing. So it's really important. Oh, first of all, she never mentions MGTOW at all in this entire video, except at this one point to imply that MGTOW and incel are the same thing, but they're not the same thing, and I have to make that very important distinction here. Because there are individuals out there that have willingly attempted to tie the two of them together, when in fact they actually don't really have all that much in common. Incel is short for involuntarily celibate, which means that they are, and she literally says it in here, they are involuntarily unable to get a girlfriend or to get sexual activity. It is not a willing choice for them to do that. And they are gynocentric, which means they almost crave female validation like a drug. MGTOW are anti-gynocentric. Alright? Many MGTOW guys, myself included, date. Many MGTOWs are actually sexually active. You know, it's kind of hard to be voluntarily celibate when you're dating. Also, you know, if MGTOW and incel are the same thing, then do you have any explanation as to why there are so many divorced fathers who are now MGTOW? Because you kind of have to have sex, you know, in order to have a kid, to be a dad. You know, just saying. So I can only conclude that you either didn't do your research or you chose to do this on purpose. It's one of the two. So which one is it? Anya. And second of all, the last photo you took. I've already mentioned Joe Rogan is not a member of the Manosphere. Joe Rogan will quite happily have feminists on his show. No feminists have actually had the nerve to actually go on a show. Jordan Peterson is not a member of the Manosphere. Never has been. Ben Shapiro. Oh my God. Jesus fucking Christ. We literally, the whole of the Manosphere, in particular MGTOW, had to go on a huge pushback campaign less than a month ago against the Daily Wire because they were going after the Manosphere. Did you know about that? Did you even try to do any research on that? And you know, of course you fucking... So, I mean, the three... Like, I'm looking at this photo of the moon, and like the three biggest faces are Rogan, Jordan Peterson, and Ben Shapiro, who are not fucking members of the Manosphere. So, you either didn't do your research or are choosing to be willfully fucking ignorant. And of course, there's also the issue around MGTOW and incel and how you were trying to, by extension, try to suggest that they're the same thing.
And I do
when
actually
they're
have
not.
some empathy for the problems that men and boys in these Manosphere communities are facing. Feeling lonely and thinking that no one you want to date will ever want to date you is painful, and it feels unfair. But saying things are unfair and crying, that's not very manly, is it now? That's not very alpha. So instead what you do is, you don't say it's not fair, you say it's not right.
Oh, Jesus. By Christ. By extension, I've had to cover every stage. She's trying to cover every point here. This is the, oh, well, men aren't allowed to cry and express their feelings. Well, I have two answers for that, Anya. First of all, in a lot of situations, if men were allowed to do that, and it's not the fucking patriarchy, right? Crying is not even really an appropriate response in a lot of situations. And also, this whole thing about men not being allowed to express their emotions, what are the places where people are not, it's not a good idea to express your emotions? Prison, work, outside social situations, and randomly out on the street. Curiously enough, it would be a very good idea for women to also not be expressing their emotions so openly in those situations. And most of the time, they don't. But when men do it, they get ridiculed for it. And of course, what feminism has tried to do is they say, oh, well, men aren't allowed to express their feelings. Well, I mean, again, right? It's like, it's one of those, and this is, we get into this, everything is wrong scenario that the current culture has put on men. And it's not about being lonely. It's about the fact that men, no matter which way they fucking go, they're wrong. If they don't express their emotions, they're being a stoic, toxic male. If they cry, they're being a crybaby and weak. If they don't approach women, they're gay and they hate women. But if they do approach women, they're creepy. If they do have a lot of success with women, they're a playboy and they're toxic and they treat women like throwaways. But if they choose to go their own way and don't pursue women, well, they're being toxic and they just hate women. So, I mean, it's like no matter which way you go, you don't win. Something that I've noticed that feminists don't seem to want to acknowledge.
Things aren't right and it's someone's fault. Would you like to hazard a guess about whose fault it is? Yes, the ingrate females who were given all these rights and then decided to distribute the right to have sex with them unevenly across the male population. We need government-enforced sexual Marxism. These ungrateful trollops are posting butt pics on the internet for money and then not letting us grope the butts. Can we please just go back to a time when men were the ones profiting from female nudity?
I literally just covered this less than 30 seconds ago. No-win situation. And I hate to break it to you, but the owners of OnlyFans, Instagram, and a lot of the porn sites are actually run by men. So yeah, men are actually voluntarily still gaining from female nudity. I mean, yeah, I hate to break it to you. And again, you didn't do your research, but I mean, yeah, OnlyFans gets a cut of every dollar. And again, with that no-win situation. I mean, he's a simp if he voluntarily views that stuff, but if he runs it, which is, by the way, what Andrew Tate was doing for a while, he's a creep and a predator, even though the women that were working under him when he was doing it did it voluntarily, and from my understanding, were actually quite well paid. So, once again, with the no-wins, I mean, you literally contradicted yourself in less than a minute.
This becomes the key function of Manosphere thought leaders. And my use of the words thought and leader here is generous to the point of idiocy. Their main job is helping young men justify their anger. To reinforce this point, I want to tell you a little story. Manosphere influencers are like Hercules. Wait, it's not a compliment. At one point, Hercules was tasked with cleaning out the stables of this king named Augeas. The king had 3,000 cows, and the cows were immortal. So there was a lot of shit in those stables. Hercules used his immense strength to redirect 2 rivers so that they ran through the stables and washed all of the shit out. This is what Manosphere influencers do. They take young men's shit and redirect it at women.
No, they do not direct it at women. They give these guys via Red Pill Rage a place to vent safely and effectively. And while they're there, they also get to learn about toxic female behavior and get pointed at about some of the activities and the actions that women do, which, Anya, does not equate to hating them. It never did. I mean, yeah, okay, there are some guys that are stuck, but you know what? I mean, if you're gonna pull that tune, you know, why don't you go look in your own fucking backyard and talk to some of the feminists that you've likely been indulging for most of your fucking life at this point that are incredibly hateful towards men. Oh, well, they're justified. Yeah, okay, well, you know what? Right back at you, right? These guys are pissed. And honestly, I'd much rather have them venting here and finding out the truth about women. And by the way, again, finding out, taking the red pill and finding out the truth about women does not equate to hating them. You're only hated because women like you say stuff like this. So yeah, you're going to get some anger because, I mean, you're practicing willful and likely in your case, knowing ignorance of the facts.
Okay, let's go. Alpha fucks beta bucks. Part 2, the natural order of things. The key idea of the Manosphere is that men and women are suffering because women and feminism have changed the natural order of things.
I believe the feminist movement is in large part to blame for the fracturing of the traditional home, where women were coerced outside of their natural roles as mothers into the workforce.
And EvoPsych supposedly proves this. The speakers do not always have the firmest grasp of the concept, so I will be doing the charitable thing and supplementing their points with supporting arguments from EvoPsych books. Here are the commandments of the Manosphere and the evolutionary psychology they're based on. I just need to put on my special shirt.
What are you wearing?
Come on, it's a casual social outfit.
Looks like you're going to a fish fry, Dwight.
No, they're howling at the moon. It's suggestive to women because of howling during sex.
What do you think? I think women are going to be very attracted to me. A woman's role is mother and nurturer.
Women's job always was procreation, to look after the family and to look after the man. That's all that they had to do.
That's all you had to do, you ungrateful hussies. EvoPsych explains this as follows. Females are responsible for gestation and lactation. That's 9 months of pregnancy, plus a minimum of 6 to 12 months of breastfeeding. During this entire time, the baby demands constant round-the-clock care and surveillance to have even the slightest chance of surviving. So women who were better at caring for their kids had higher reproductive fitness, meaning they had a higher chance of having a child who survives. Women are valuable if they're young and beautiful.
And you, my dear, are a depreciating asset. So every day that goes by, you're going to be less and less beautiful.
Even the host is like, whoa. The female reproductive window is shorter than the male, so it makes evolutionary sense for a male to long-term pair bond with a woman who is younger, so that he can get the maximum amount of babies out of her. So romantic it could be on a Hallmark card. Also, youth is correlated with fertility, and beauty, according to EvoPsych, signifies good genes. Men are valuable if they are providers.
The reality is that women are biologically hardwired to want men that make more money than them and have more status than them. So you can say,
because motherhood essentially incapacitates women, those women who selected men who were able to invest resources in them and their offspring would have been at a considerable advantage in survival. I will say I do not know what this man can provide a woman other than secondhand embarrassment, but hey, women need to be chaste.
You asked me why body count matters. You were kind of pushing at me to... First off, it's a natural biological response in men that does not exist in women. And that comes down to paternity uncertainty.
I like that he enunciates paternity uncertainty because when you're talking to women, it's important to speak very clearly so that they understand you. Paternity uncertainty just describes the fact that because of female anatomy, it's not easy to tell who the father is if you don't have paternity tests and trust. In the past, promiscuity was dangerous for women in the sense that it carried the risk of getting pregnant and bearing a child without the benefits of an investing man. And for males, it was evolutionarily important to control female sexuality so that they didn't end up investing resources and time in a child that wasn't theirs. 5. It's good for men to sleep with a lot of women.
Every single sultan had more than one woman. Look at the history, read the Bible, it's all there.
According to EvoPsych, human males can afford to go both for quality and quantity in terms of reproduction. They can invest lots of time and resources in one woman and their shared children. That's the quality approach. And that way they maximize the chance of those kids surviving. And they can also go the quantity route, sleep with as many women as they possibly can, and hope that some of those women go on to have kids that survive. So those are the commandments, the rules. Now, I want to explain one thing. In this video, I'm not trying to completely dismiss evolutionary psychology as a valid science. I don't need to do that to prove that these guys are full of shit. Even if we were to assume that every single thing EvoPsych says is completely, totally, utterly valid, the conclusions that these intellectual powerhouses draw are bullshit. The thing is, as you'll see, unfortunately, EvoPsych is just so theoretical, so far removed from reality, that you can only really use it as a surfboard in the ocean of your own delusion. Any person who has a life in the physical realm understands that these are not rules anyone has to live by.
Here, let's just go through these commandments and actually see if they actually are or not. Okay, women's natural role is a mother and a nurturer. Well, generally speaking, hunter-gatherer days, the women stayed home, did the gathering, nursed the kids. It wasn't generally a good idea to have the women out hunting animals. Sometimes they did, but most of the time they stayed close to the nest and looked after the kids, which was, by the way, a full-time gig. Women are valuable if they are young and beautiful. Well, you know, I hate to break it to you, but yeah, you don't see, and this is something that feminists like Anya here and older feminists will bitch about all the time. You don't see the young, fit football professional baseball players, the rock musicians, the quote-unquote, really quote-unquote high-value guys fawning over women like, let's say, the press secretary or the vice president or somebody. You don't see them fawning over or Hillary Clinton. You don't see them fawning over women like that, okay? Like, it doesn't happen. So yeah, a woman who is younger and better looking is more valuable than a woman who's older. Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but that one's true. Men are valuable if they are providers. Yeah, well, I mean, again, right, all you got to do is, and this is something that women feminists in particular, get really pissed off at. They get really pissed off when this is brought up. But you know what? I'm just gonna go back to the Harvey Weinstein photo and post and remind everybody that more than a few women in Hollywood overlooked Harvey Weinstein's antics for likely a quarter of a century, give or take. And they only dogpiled on him only when it became so obvious at what he was doing that they had no other choice but to. Women should be chaste. Again, I haven't heard that specifically. What she's trying to do here is try to put a right-wing neocon conservative spin to this. Women with a lot of sexual partners are not valuable. There's multiple reasons why, but there's not. It is generally frowned upon, and I hear the double standard all the time. Well, how come if men do it, it's looked down on? First of all, you know what? You want to know what a woman requires most of the time, especially if she's really good looking, to get laid? She just simply has to be there. For a man to get multiple sexual partners actually requires skill. 5, it's good for a man to sleep with a lot of women. Oh, yes, no. Having sexual experience, especially in the current dating marketplace, is probably a good idea. But is it good necessarily for a guy to sleep with a lot of women? That's debatable. Okay, but this is not science-based advice given by the Manosphere. There are no commandments in the Manosphere that this is what guys have to do. There is evidence to back this up, and there is scientifically based evidence to back this up, but these are not hardwired, cardinal written rules in the Manosphere. And again, right, if Anya had actually done her research, she would have known this. But again, just like when I was doing this with Mooncat, it is very, very clear that she
because
didn't.
For rules to be rules, there needs to be some value from following them. For example, don't touch fire because it's hot. I follow that rule, and it works out great for me. Let's take the chastity rule, for example. There is no value for me here because, despite all the evidence to the contrary, I am not, in fact, a Victorian-era cobbler's daughter, whose best chance at a good life is to marry a man who will feed and clothe me in exchange for my piety and my willing womb.
Where are you getting your information from, Anya? I have never heard any guy in the Manosphere, except maybe for some of the extremely religious trad cons talk about this. In fact, if you had bothered to do research into the Manosphere, which, as I'm going through, it's very clear that you didn't, you would have found out that, the general consensus inside the Manosphere is that going back to the TradCon model doesn't work. In fact, a lot of people in the Manosphere actually hold out the TradCon model as actually being not
Nowadays,
workable
we've got
either.
contraception, birth control, paternity tests, relative economic independence, a different social moral structure. So there's really no reason for men or women to not sleep with anyone they please. Body count can only matter in the sense that it might signify certain personality traits like impulsivity, openness to new experience, spirituality.
Having gone through enough of this video and having had to tolerate multiple hours of having to listen to every single word that Anya says, I'm going to have to assume at this point that Anya is a sex-positive feminist. There's really no other way to describe a character, especially after listening to that last part. The thing that I have to point out about sex-positive feminists is that, sex-positive feminists are only talking about increasing the sexual power of women. They certainly don't want men having the same ability to expand upon their capabilities. Something, by the way, which Anya is explaining this hypocrisy about her character in abundance as I'm going through this.
Everything is good. Live and let live. But no. You see, these are, according to the Manosphere, biological truths.
If you get out of a bad relationship, you should learn evolutionary psychology about what women actually biologically want from you.
Even if you think you're happy, if you're not living by these rules, you're actually unhappy.
Show me the place where these rules have been put up. Where are they posted? Where are these endorsed? Because, again, I have gone through a substantially large amount of content inside the Manosphere. I have both, more particularly with MGTOW, but with men's rights and PUA as well, IBMOR as well. And I have not ever seen these rules posted up anywhere. So, Anya, show me where the fuck these rules are posted up. And also, Anya, just in case you try to call my bluff on this one post on Reddit does not constitute mass acceptance. Okay? I want to see multiple postings at multiple locations. And don't try to sneak in posts at the last minute and try to claim that they were put up. Because, I can track if something was posted up recently.
And with every woman that I've worked with, there is this deep, deep, deep desire, regardless of what she says externally, to submit to the leadership of a man that she knows can properly hold down the emotional space and really put her interest at the forefront. Regardless of what she says externally.
In the next chapters, we're going to go over why these are, in fact, not biological truths.
And this is a very common thing with feminists, even the ones that are like Anya here, that are making an attempt to make themselves appear smart and make it look like they're doing a lot of research here. There's this disconnect, and this is the second time this has happened, because she did this once before, where there's so little coordination and so little thought of constructing a narrative that won't hold up outside of the little girly sphere that she's evolved, that she doesn't stop to think that, maybe contradicting yourself literally on the next sentence is something that can be very easily spotted and taken down. Using the cherry-picked logo right after you cherry-picked what was it, maybe 15-second clip to try to make your point. Yeah, again, right? Feminists just love to contradict themselves.
Part 3. Cherry picking. Noam Chomsky is widely considered to be one of the most influential intellectuals alive today. And he has said that we need to be skeptical of evolutionary psychology because...
What evolutionary psychology, as it's now called, sociobiology, used to be, teaches us about the nature of humans. But the problem is it doesn't teach us anything much at all. When you get to something as complex as human beings, what you just find is almost anything you look for.
If you're going to use Noam Chomsky as an example, then I get to use Noam Chomsky as an example. So the following video is an example of Chomsky proving that even somebody who's as quote-unquote intelligent as he is, and he is actually a very intelligent guy, kind of makes my point for me. Also, he is a professor of linguistics, not evolutionary biology. So, being a professor of linguistics, that does not automatically make him an expert in every other academic field.
What are your thoughts on mandating vaccines?
Well, it's a mixed story. I think people who refuse to accept vaccines, I think the right response for them is not to force them to, but rather to insist that they be isolated.
Here is a silly example that illustrates Chomsky's words, in which Joe Rogan finds exactly what he's looking for. In case you don't know, Joe Rogan is one of the top podcasters in the world, and his audience is mainly male. Here, Joe and Adam Conover of the Adam Ruins Everything show are talking about beauty ideals. Joe says that he thinks beauty ideals don't change because they're biologically prescribed.
This narrative of men being attracted to the woman with large breasts and a small waist and a big ass, where do you think that started? Because this is like evolutionary biology is pretty much settled on the idea that the reason why is the large hips would indicate that the woman would be easier to give birth. Having large breasts and a large ass would indicate that she has she's fertile, and then she has ample fat storage.
Adam disagrees and says he thinks beauty ideals change with the culture.
That's what we're told from an early age. That this is the sort of women that men are attracted to, and so a lot of men end up adopting that, right?
Third time now. Joe Rogan is not a member of the Manosphere. Have to keep saying that because she keeps bringing him up as... Oh, by the way, that absolutely proves that she didn't do her research. Also, it's very clear that she didn't watch or cherry-picked one very particular spot in Adam's Ruins Everything's video with Joe Rogan, because if you had watched the whole thing, you would have realized that Joe Rogan absolutely destroys Adam during that particular show. So, yeah, you brought up a guy who got absolutely destroyed on Joe Rogan, and you brought up Joe Rogan as an example of the Manosphere again, even though if you actually bothered to do your research, that Joe Rogan is not a member of the Manosphere. Also, I'm going to toss a little video in at the end that I kind of think adds to my point on this. But again, right, I mean, I'm just going to say it. Yeah, I don't know where you got your information from, but it's very clear that you didn't do the watching or the research that your video that you're trying so desperately to claim you did, that you did. Because it's very obvious that you didn't. And also, I'm going to throw in one last thing here. I just realized it. What you did with Adam Sartain, with the Joe Rogan podcast, that's literally cherry picking. The very thing that you're accusing
Because studies have shown with 37 different cultures, no television, movies, or film, no billboards or magazines. And in all 37 cultures, the men preferred women with a 0.72 hip to waist ratio on average, signs of youth and facial symmetry. The women preferred men that were taller than them, not exceptionally tall, they didn't have to be 6 feet tall, but taller than them. In all of these societies, men were more interested in casual sex than women were. So it's these things that I'm supposed to believe that are cultural constructs, turns out exist in every one of these cultures that have nothing to do with each other. That means that these things exist in genetics, not in culture. And so that's very offensive for a lot of people to believe.
And it's true, we can see very different beauty icons at different times in our history. Look at Kate Moss and Kim Kardashian. Kate Moss's body was considered ideal in the 90s especially, and Kim's in the 2010s. They obviously have very different body shapes, but they are both beauty icons. Kim's body is more voluptuous, and it seems to fit Joe Rogan's description better. But guess what? Evolutionary psychology also has an explanation for why Kate's body is ideal. According to EvilPsych, the #1 marker by which men measure a woman's attractiveness is youth, because youth correlates with fertility and overall health. And Kate's slender body shape looks more youthful than Kim's voluptuous one. If we look farther back, we'll see other shapes idolized in culture. These thick queens are called Paleolithic Venuses, and there's some research that suggests that their shape is connected to what evolution demanded of people at the time. Dr. Richard Johnson writes, "They rank among the earliest art and endured from 38,000 to 14,000 years before present, one of the most arduous climactic periods in human history." The theory is that because survival required sufficient nutrition for childbearing women, the overnourished woman became an ideal symbol of survival and beauty during episodes of starvation and climate change in Paleolithic Europe.
Those statuettes taken in isolation, which, by the way, I've noticed that feminists love to drag this out as an example that beauty standards are cultural, even though I literally posted up less than a minute ago a video which clearly demonstrates that. I mean, it's not. But they love to bring this out, and they always the three that I've seen so far, and don't ask me to remember where I saw them, but the 3 times that I've seen feminists drag this up, they always drag them out in isolation, and there's generally a lack of context. There's generally a lack of an explanation of where they came from, or what they actually symbolize. For all we know, that particular symbol could be coming from the high priestess or some other woman, some older woman who was making a figurine of herself, who, by the way, may or may not have also had a sexual dysfunction and was perhaps using her political position to gain sexual favor from the other males in the group. And again, I am going to bring this up again. Show me the place in any society at any point in time where you saw the most physically fit, the most physically attractive, the most high value males, for lack of a better term, fawning over say a woman like Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton or Theresa May or Anya Merkel or any of those other older women. Like bringing up a statuette from back in the Stone Ages to try and prove your point, when even statues of women back in Babylon still had that hip to waist ratio in them. And they, like I said before, that's the reason why I posted up that video earlier. You know, that hip to waist ratio is something that's even preferred with blind men. So yeah, that argument, again, falls apart because there is a multitude of other explanations as to why that statue was made. And I find it very ironic that you're accusing evolutionary psychologists of pulling stuff out of their ass when that's literally what you just did with those statuettes. Anya, I gotta keep saying this. Another sterling example of feminists contradicting themselves or engaging in hypocrisy.
So it seems as though different female shapes were idolized at different points in human history. It also looks like not only does evolution influence culture, but culture influences evolution. In fact, it's almost as though evolution is not as straightforward as these beacons of intelligence would have us believe.
Based upon the level of dishonesty, the straw man, the projection, the twisting of facts, the very clear examples all the way through, where it's very clear that you didn't do the research that you're so desperately trying to claim you did. You're in no position to be calling anybody in a mocking way a paragon of intelligence, Anya, because you're not exactly one yourself, unless, of course, you want to count intelligence as being knowingly and willfully dishonest in misrepresentation of the facts. Something, by the way, that I've seen a lot of women
Part
like
4,
you do.
Hyperevolution. What do we mean when we say something is natural? As far as I can tell, natural often means things that are old and good, and unnatural means new and bad. The problem is, everyone has a different opinion on when the natural stuff ended and the unnatural stuff began. If you're a crunchy granola type, you might say, walking barefoot is natural, shoes are unnatural. I need to live my truth, spread my toes, and give myself compound fractures tromping around our asphalted cities in ugly, thin-soled shoes. If you're a certain type of guy, you might say, sugar babies natural, women having jobs unnatural, and if you ask that guy how exactly is everyone providing for all the sugar babies, he will kick you out of his podcast.
The one podcast that she's referring to here is Fresh and Fit. Now, I don't know the exact numbers of percentage of women that have been booted off the Fresh and Fit podcast because, one, I'm a MGTOW, so I really don't care. But two, the reasons why I believe there is a video or a website. I saw it once. I don't know where it is, but I do believe there's either a location or a video which shows or has broken down the reasons why every single woman that's been booted off the Fresh and Fit podcast has been booted off the Fresh and Fit podcast. Most of them, I've noticed, has been because they were drunk or they were being rude or they were being disrespectful. There's disagreeing and then there's disagreeing and being abusive at the same time, which, of course, you'll notice that Anya doesn't mention. She just mentions, oh, well, these women are just disagreeing with him, and therefore, because they are disagreeing with him, he's going to boot them off. Here's the thing. I have seen, Melina, earlier on, she really vociferously disagreed with the Fresh and Fit crew. She was not booted off the show. That spot earlier on is living proof that what Melina has just said, that spot with Melina, is a living and breathing proof that what Anya is saying is just not structurally true. But then I'm kind of expecting this from Anya at this point.
I would argue that everything about human beings is natural. We are little clumps of blood and meat and lymph and hurt feelings. Every thought and feeling I have is biological. My desire to have a baby is biological. My desire to earn money is also biological. When a feminist thought forms in my brain, it is not because progressive black magic has possessed my body.
She hides it really well here, but this is what is otherwise known as snark. She's being very intellectual about it. This is a concession that she really actually doesn't have much of an argument here. It's not feminist black magic. It's actually called propaganda and indoctrination. It's not feminist black magic, and you are the result of the things that you consume. And I've been to your other YouTube channel, and I know what you like to talk about. You are fully indoctrinated into the cult of feminism, and let's make no mistake about this. Feminism, as it currently exists, cannot and has been making efforts internationally to try to make any criticism of it illegal. That is the same thing that religions and other cults have attempted to do over the years, especially when they're dogma, and that's what it is, and that's what you've basically been spewing this whole show is about. It's not black magic, and you're hiding it really well. And I know snark.
We tend to think of our brains as computers. Culture is software, and our brain architecture is the hardware that never changes. But this metaphor is wrong. Joseph Henrich is a professor of evolutionary biology at Harvard, and he's in the top 0.01% of academics in the world by citation, which means he's super mega cool. Here's how he explains the problem with the computer metaphor.
One of the challenges to understanding psychology is we have this digital computer metaphor. So people tend to think about their brains like a computer, and they expect there to be hardware and software. So psychologists often think they study the hardware, and they leave it to the sociologists and anthropologists to study the software. But it turns out our brains are somewhere in between, where they can create firmware. They can make new hardware, new connections that don't exist if you don't experience a certain environment.
None of the people you have brought up so far in this dissertation of yours, and I'm not even I'm really stretching, and I'm being, you know what, I'm going to throw it right back. I'm being generous and calling what you've been doing so far as a dissertation on you. I have not heard Jordan Peterson or Jordan Busser, any of the individuals, like I said, you brought up throughout this entire video, describe the human brain as a computer. Like, not one. Knowing what I know about feminism, what you're trying to do here indirectly, and I mean, this is the reason why you're smart and you're stupid at the same time. What you're trying to do here is that you're trying to say is because the brain is not plastic and the brain can make new connections. Therefore, the cultural mores can change. Therefore, male sexual preference, by extension, can change over the period of time, which is the reason why you brought up those rock carving, those rock dolls earlier, right? You're trying to imply that the events that events, and because the human brain is malleable and can change via biology, that somehow, that means that the cultural norms can change as well. That's what you're trying to imply here. Consider your bluff.
One example of this firmware that Henrik provides is reading.
And so when people learn to read, we can actually see that they get specialized circuitry in the left hemisphere, they get a thicker corpus callosum, they get whole brain activation for speech, even though what they're being trained to do is read. And so you actually have physical changes to the brain as a consequence of basically a cultural training routine.
Reading an alphabet developed, actually, it's a fairly recent thing, maybe only about, at most, 8,000 years old. And that's really being generous, I think, going that far back. It probably doesn't go that far back. I can tell you one thing, though. It didn't develop. It wasn't around at the time when those little female statuettes that you tried to pass off earlier, when you tried to use those. Alphabet didn't exist back then. So yeah, bad example. Yet more proof that you didn't actually do the research that you claimed you did. Reading isn't an example
of evolution proper because it's still not heritable. If you learn how to read, your kid will still also have to learn how to read. But there's lots of other cultural innovations that did lead to heritable traits. A famous example is lactose tolerance. Adult humans used to be universally lactose intolerant, but as agriculture became more common, being able to digest dairy became an advantage. So the mutation that creates lactose tolerance spread across populations, especially among people who had a really hard time finding something to eat. I'm thinking that maybe this is why Slavs go so hard for dairy. I mean, we don't just have kefir and smetana, we also have rязанка, varinets, простокваша. I guess if you had long cold winters and only cabbage and potatoes to see you through, milk curd would seem amazing. I'm making it sound like I don't like milk curd. Milk curd is amazing. Tvorog. Today, in the United States, only about a third of people don't have this mutation and can't enjoy cheese. Sucks to suck. Agriculture gave us a new heritable trait in 10,000 years. Normie evolution takes hundreds of thousands of years. So in this sense, culture is hyper-evolution.
After putting up with Anya and her intellectual and knowing willful ignorance and dishonesty for going on 9 hours now, I gotta be a little bit sarcastic and snarky myself here. Yeah, I don't think sexual selection is based on whether somebody can fucking drink milk or not. And to my knowledge, the use of evolutionary psychology is to explain how the human species functioned back then and how those characteristics and traits and behaviors manifest themselves in current modern society. And I've already covered that. This is not a random pull a concept out of your ass thing. Jordan Peterson and David Buss have both been published, I mean, combined, I think, somewhere between, well over 100, 200 times, between the two of them. Okay, they are well researched, and you have to go through this thing called peer review to get your stuff published in an environment, by the way, psychology, which is highly dominated by feminists. So, yeah, using lactose intolerance as an example to debunk evolutionary psychology is a very poor
and culture and
example
technology
of
have
that.
changed everything. The air we breathe, how we move, what we eat, what we see. And what I see is a lot of men who are barely coping. But the good news is we can change that. This is David Buss on Jordan Peterson's podcast. Jordan Peterson is a giant simp for David Buss.
Jordan Peterson and David Buss. Wow. Imagine that. Two people in the same field of study having mutual respect and regard for each other. I mean, that's totally fucking unprecedented, Anya. That must be the first time in man's entire history that's happened. Oh, wait, no. Respect for somebody in the same field as you is something that's generally considered a very polite and respectful thing to do, and it's peer review. Jesus Christ, peer review. And you have the nerve to call Jordan Peterson a simp for David Buss.
He would die for this man. If we're comparing humans to animals, then when Jordan Peterson sees David Buss, he rolls over to show him his belly. They've just finished discussing how women created patriarchy through sexual selection, and then Buss says this.
If women changed their mate preferences so that they didn't care about status and resources and those qualities, and you iterated that over enough generations, it would ultimately change male behavior.
The very presence and existence of the white knight, male feminist, simp, mangina, whatever you want to call him, the very fact that that particular type of male exists, and that there has been a rather interesting story along the way of male feminists getting caught being lechers and creeps towards women is an indication that, men do indeed curtail their interests and will chameleon to what the female wants or what the male perceives
They
that
have
the
a
female
big chuckle
wants.
about how stupid feminists are because they don't understand that women will always choose dominant, high-status men because it's our biology. Except they forget to mention that high status can mean a number of different things. Maybe it's the funniest man or the kindest or the smartest. There is no one universal big hierarchy because, and I cannot repeat this enough, we are not lobsters. And now it's
I think the best way to describe what a high-status male is to post up a photo of Harvey Weinstein. Now, whether Anya Turnbull disagrees with me or not, I honestly don't give a shit anymore. Harvey Weinstein was, by his definition, and certainly by the definition of Hollywood, because they were quite willing to overlook his improprieties. And that's, I say improprieties, I'm putting it mild, for a quarter century. The issue is that, I mean, the one of the issues that I've been seeing, and this is something that, I mean, that in particular Destiny has tried specifically to try to go after role for. Well, can you define what a high status male is? Give me a definition of a high status male. And the reason why they were trying to go after the Manosphere for that particular term is because if there is no definition of a high status male, then the argument that females only go after high status males can be basically it can be dug under, it can be undermined, right? The only issue is that once again, right, and this is the reason why you're looking at the photo of Harvey Weinstein right now. Potentially hundreds of women looked the other way or chose to sleep with Harvey Weinstein because of his status. I mean, by any definition, and I dare you, Anya, or anybody else, to try to argue against the fact that Harvey Weinstein was not a high status, because he was. Now, the other part on that is that, well, the definition of what a high status male changes, and it can be this or that, and she actually has the nerve to say the kindest, and it's like, no, women have a consistent, and I've heard this argument before, as they get older, their values change and whatever. I have seen women in their 40s and 50s still knowingly hooking up with the asshole. At no point in history do I think was the kindest man ever considered high status. Definitely the nice guy is high status, but then again, you're probably also going to be looking at a photo of Teal Swan. The nice guy is just, I think you could probably classify a lot of male feminists as quote-unquote nice guys, but there's a lot of guys in MGTOW that are reformed ex-nice guys as well. The kindest guys tended to get shit on. Something, of course, that you will never, well, actually, I won't say never. I mean, I've encountered 3 articles in my entire lifetime where I have seen a woman honestly give a dissertation about why women consistently and knowingly choose asshole. And Anya's gonna, I really don't personally give a shit if Anya likes that or not. But again, right? Anya, if by any chance you happen to see this and you get to this part, yeah, I deliberately posted up that photo of Harvey Weinstein to fucking remind you that he was considered a high-status male. Prove me wrong.
Murder is also natural. In the Manosphere, people often seem to think that what is natural is morally neutral and uncontrollable. But then what about our very natural, ancient little habit of murdering each other? David Buss writes, "Murder is fundamentally in our nature because over the eons of human evolution, murder was so surprisingly beneficial in the intense game of reproductive competition. But we have legal, social, and moral laws that prohibit murder. The entire history of human civilization is us trying to tame nature and by extension ourselves. It's the whole reason why we develop these fat-ass..."
Oh, murder didn't play a part in society. That's just not true. Have you heard the theory as to why there's so many more right-handed people as opposed to left-handed people? That's because back in the days when we were swinging swords and clubs and whatever, if there was a left-handed warrior, his heart was left exposed, and if he wasn't able to effectively block with his sword, he ended up dead. A lot more frequently than, say, somebody who was able to use a shield to block his heart and fought with his right hand. But no. Murder had absolutely no part in the evolution. There was a creature known as Robustus, which was actually a physically larger hominid back in the days when we were still not much more than monkeys, which the monkeys, the ones in the middle, were able to wipe out Robustus via murder. And there was also a smaller species that the speed that our early ancestors also wiped out via murder as well. So yeah, to say that murder did not play a factor in human evolution is just absolutely fucking ludicrous.
To have some control over the more ancient parts of our brains. And that is a good thing. Nobody's trying to shackle rugged, untamable masculinity, if that's what people are thinking. My cortex gives me a relatively high degree of control over my brain. For example, if my brain was attracted to a man like Andrew Tate, I would cut open my head and throw out my hypothalamus.
I have actually run out of fingers and toes of the number of women who said that they don't find Andrew Tate anywhere near remotely attractive, and yet in some cases, one in particular, Liz Wheeler, literally could not stop talking about the guy. So, yeah, I'm going to call bullshit on that one.
Another very old and natural habit of ours is male violence towards women. EvoPsych believes that most of this violence falls under the category of something called mate guarding. Mate guarding is exactly what it sounds like. It's trying to stop your mate from having children with someone else. David Buss writes, "In a cross-cultural perspective, the ways in which men attempt to control women's sexuality is nothing short of bewildering. See, guys, even your boy thinks it's weird."
What is this now? The third time? The fourth time I have said this? I'm kind of losing track because it's now pushing what? Oh, wow, look at that. I think we're at 11 hours. Yeah, we are. Oh, well, actually just a little over 10. Sorry, my mistake. a little over 10 hours of having to deal with you, and my patience is really starting to wear thin, which is a good thing. We're almost at the end of this video. Jordan Peterson is not a member of the fucking Manosphere. Don't know how many times I have to say that. In fact, again, if you had bothered to do even a rudimentary amount of research instead of, going over to feminist sites to borrow all your fucking content, Anya, you would have known
Veiling
that,
a woman's
but you
face
didn't.
is an attempt to conceal a woman's sexual signals from other men. Forms of genital mutilation seem designed to dissuade women from seeking sexual pleasure.
I'm not really a gambling kind of guy, but if I was a gambling kind of guy, I would put money down on the fact that if I were to go to either one of Anya Turnbull's 2 channels, there is not a single solitary mention about grooming gangs, Muslim rape gangs, Tara Arush, and specifically there's almost certainly, like 1,000% likely, that there is no indication of any type that she knew about the Tara Arush event that happened in Cologne at the start of 2017. Like, I'm not a gambling guy, but I would put
In a later
money
book,
on
Buss
that.
also tags intimate partner violence, rape, honor killings, sexual and emotional abuse, and coercive control in relationships as forms of mate guarding. These are cruel and violent practices, but in many parts of the world, they're barely considered a crime. For example,
Anya here is suggesting that Buss and Jordan Peterson are both attempting to justify the those actions that Anya was just describing, that they're somehow, by explaining them, they simply by entertaining the thought of why that takes place, that they somehow accept it or rationalize it or approve of it. All right? It is the sign of an intelligent mind that you can entertain a concept without actually accepting it. I just want you to think about that, right? Using Anya's logic, for instance, if I were to talk about, say, how theoretically I could build a nuclear bomb and how I would set it off, or how, say, in an intelligence department about how they theorize about how various terrorist events take place, that following the same logic that Anya Turnbull is attempting to use here, that the process of them doing that means that they accept that is an acceptable action on their part. That is Anya Turnbull's logic taken to its proper conclusion in another field.
Domestic abuse is decriminalized. And there's an old Russian proverb that says, "Bьет, значит любит," which means if he hits you, that means he loves you. I need to make more content about Russia, honestly. There is a lot to discuss. Manosphere podcasters like saying that men wanting a woman who is not a hoe is not misogynist, it's just a personal preference. If it's a personal preference, why do you keep saying that it's a biological truth?
This is the part where I actually literally stopped on the street because I was walking down the street when I listened to this the first time. I stopped. I had to go back and re-listen to this part in facepalm after I heard it. Just go back and listen to what she just said. She is basically saying here that if you're a man and you have a preference that you are effectively approving of all the toxic male, you're basically a toxic, ugly male because you have a selection, you have a preference. That's effectively what she's saying here. This is when I listened. This is the one thing that I heard when I listened to it. It was like, this is the thing that actually caused me to want to do a takedown of this video. Like, this is just a level of dishonesty that I think this is the reason why I needed to take Anya Turnbull down. Women are allowed to have a preference. Women are allowed to have a selection. Women are allowed to do this, that, and whatever. But if you're a male, you just have to grunt and take whatever the fuck women throw at you. And how dare you have standards? How dare you have preferences? How dare you have any regard or any judgment in regards to women? This is what we call the feminist imperative, which is to basically reduce a man down to a workhorse, a slave, and a sperm donor. And fundamentally the reason why I had to do this response.
Women are being brutally punished worldwide right now for being sexual beings. That is why telling a woman that she shouldn't be sexual is not a neutral thing to say. And calling a woman a hoe isn't like other insults.
All right, let's go over something else that Anya is pretty much saying here. effectively, with 4 billion or almost 4 billion males on the planet, if another male does something bad to another woman somewhere else on the globe, you are automatically guilty because that guy had a penis and you had a penis, therefore you're responsible for what that guy did. Okay, great, Anya. Then I can hold you responsible for the Scum Manifesto. I can hold you for Vilyet Tiptree, who openly declared that, that it was perfectly acceptable to wipe out 90% of the male species. I can hold you guilty for Mona El-Tahawy, who wrote a book saying it was perfectly all right to engage in physical assault on men. I can hold you responsible for the Duluth model. I can hold you responsible for Clementine Ford, who said that COVID wasn't killing men fast enough. I can hold you responsible for a couple of professors, I can't remember their specific names, who were openly saying that, that there needs to be a reduction in the number of men in the world. I can hold you guilty for every feminist in the world who wants a male genocide. Yeah. You want to go to the projection level? I can go there too, Anya. You want to hold me responsible for some asshole with a fucking dick between his legs? I can hold you responsible for every toxic action that every woman has done to a man. And I can hold you personally responsible for every woman that has ever abused her fucking children.
Why do you make your lips red? Because they turn red during sexual arousal. That's why. Why do you put rouge on your cheeks? Same reason.
So, Jordan Peterson, clearly part of the core cast of this video, had an interview with Vice, in which he said that one of his concerns about an integrated workspace is the fact that if women come in looking sexy, men will be confused. I'm going to take his argument seriously, because I am being earnest as fuck here.
You hear that, folks? She's going to be as earnest as fuck here. This is a woman who, literally just a few seconds ago, tried to project onto men that they should somehow feel guilty because one of the 4 billion other males on the planet did something bad to another woman in some other part of the world, and you're automatically guilty because you have a dick. Anya is going to be earnest as fuck here. Just giving you a heads
I thought about why I wear
that.
makeup, and the truth is, I do wear makeup to look attractive. And to be completely honest with you, when girls say things like, I don't wear makeup for other people, I wear it for me, I never quite understand what they mean. But then I thought about makeup looks like the ones in Euphoria. This is clearly not about quote-unquote signaling sexual arousal. This is about individuality and artistry and fashion, and historically makeup was also used for lots of different reasons. Ashwanta Jackson writes for JSTAR, quote, in ancient Egypt, all genders used makeup as part of a daily routine. In ancient Greece, prostitutes had to wear lipstick by law to distinguish them from non-sex workers. That sounds like something Professor Peterson would like.
Again, it's really important to call out when someone tries to imply something about someone else. It's important to call it out here. What Anya is attempting to do here is that she is saying, because makeup is used for other things other than looking physically attractive, therefore women don't put on makeup in the workplace to appear physically attractive. Which, of course, is just a load of bull. And basically what she's trying to imply here is that it's the woman's fault for putting on the makeup. And because men are just such low IQ knuckle fucking draggers that they can't fucking help themselves if women put fucking makeup on. That's what Anya's attempting to imply here with this. And literally, I broke off right at the point where it says Jordan Peterson will approve of that. Okay, Anya, find the specific place in any of Jordan Peterson's writings where he says he actually fucking approves of rape.
High social status, and suffragettes used lipstick as an emblem of women's emancipation. Makeup also has a spiritual function. Henna body art is widely used in weddings in South Asia, both for the bride and groom, and it signifies prosperity and good luck. And in South Africa, the Xhosa tribe paint boys' faces as part of the ritual that symbolizes their passage into manhood. I'm not saying that when I put makeup on, it's a religious practice, but it does feel like a meaningful ritual. I mean, I sit down and I focus on myself and I brush my face with various brushes. It's the closest I've ever come to self-care. By the time I'm done, my energies are all aligned and moisturized. Makeup is also used in military and other conflict situations, as camouflage or for intimidation. Makeup is a mask, and I don't mean caked-up foundation. I mean it's a tool that, like a mask, can change your perceived identity. Makeup can be aggressive. It can make you feel powerful. Sometimes when I'm doing my makeup, I feel like Shoshana Dreyfus, about to go burn down a cinema full of Nazis.
And I've been putting on fire.
I guess, after all, I do wear makeup for me. That was my generous response to Jordan Peterson. My ungenerous response is this. Human beings express romantic and sexual interest in each other in a variety of different context-specific ways. Does Jordan Peterson walk into office buildings, see red lipstick, and turn into a werewolf?
Jordan Peterson didn't say that. That is you once again attempting to imply something on Jordan Peterson that he didn't mean or intend. And, to Anya, again, because, I mean, I had to do the same thing with Mooncat on this. If I could take a 6 to 10 second clip of Jordan Peterson, I would be very capable of blowing that out of fucking context, too, which is exactly what you're doing here with him in that Vice interview.
Because he certainly seems to be implying that men are animals who cannot comprehend that lipstick means one thing in one context and another in another context. You know, men wear suits to work with shoulder pads that make them look bigger and stronger. But I do not expect them to start wrestling in the conference room in a mating ritual display of dominance.
That's a false equivalency. And again, at this point, I would say that I'm kind of surprised, but I'm not. Again, you took a 10-second clip of Jordan Peterson and have attempted to take it completely out of context and to suggest that he approves of rape culture and rape and sexual assault and sexual harassment. And now, this is basically
Part 7, Zero Utility. In his comments about evolutionary psychology, Noam Chomsky also said this.
You want to find aggressiveness and violence and sadism, we can find that. We don't need evolutionary psychology to tell us about it. We see it in the world.
You know, I get that Noam Chomsky's a bit of a darling for leftists and wokesters. And that, I mean, Noam Chomsky kind of leans probably a little bit too far to the left for a lot of people to feel comfortable. Being an expert on linguistics and propaganda does not make Noam Chomsky an expert on psychology. Any more than me being in recovery for as long as I've been in recovery does not fucking make me a medical expert on anything. Okay? Like, just because Chomsky is one of the top linguistic scientists in the world and wrote the manual on how propaganda works, that does not make him an expert on anything else. And again, right, Noam Chomsky's credibility took a serious hit with me when he fucking said that the unvaccinated.
Here's an example that proves his point. In the late 1970s, evolutionary psychologists Martin Daly and Margot Wilson theorized that stepkids are more vulnerable to abuse than biological kids. Later, they proved this hypothesis. However, both Daly and Wilson point out that they did not discover this phenomenon. Quote, cruel step-parents are staple characters in folklore from every corner of the globe.
Oh, please, you don't think that
Hold your tongue. So like Chomsky says, we don't need Evocite to tell us that. We can see it in
so just because it's obvious does not mean that we have to actually prove that it's obvious. Actually, Anya, yes, we do have to prove that it is obvious. I have had situations happen, and this is just a personal anecdote, but this has also happened. I've also seen people in the press and the media attempt to pull this as well, where, for instance, and this is a personal note, there's one time when I was working out of town, but I wasn't like out of town. I was like more like out in the exurbs, and we had to get a ride back and forth. And there was one guy who usually got a ride back in with somebody else, but his ride didn't show up that day. So he wanted to get a ride with the company truck on the way back, and I had to tell him, it's like, no, you know what? Like, you know, that's not that we can't do that. That's not that's against the rules. And even though he knew it was against the rules, he still insisted that I go ask the driver if I could get a ride back. If he could, that he could get a ride back, even though I already knew what the answer was going to be. But I had to go ask anyway, and I have seen that on TV. Oh, well, no, I mean, well, here's a prime example. There was a reporter in Philadelphia who literally had to walk, I believe it's past the Kensington area, or he lived in the Kensington area. He lived in downtown Philadelphia. I can't remember the name of the reporter, but I mean, he lived in absolute denial of what was going on right in front of his face. And he stayed that way until he got brutally murdered, even though he was staring at it day after day after day after day. So yes, Anya, you do have to prove that something is actually real, even if it is patently obvious, because there are people out there who will literally deny something that is right in front of their face. This is something that Bezmenov talked about. You know, Bezmenov, another intellectual that maybe you may have heard of. No, let me guess, that's right. No, Bezmenov doesn't probably fit into your worldview. The other issue
is that EvoPsych doesn't really offer solutions to the problems it identifies.
Of course it doesn't. It explains why the problem is there. If you want to talk about solution, then you get into, actual psychology.
EvoPsych is always trading in distal causes, the kind of ultimate whys, which is very cool and interesting, but there's so many other closer factors that affect things too. This means that EvoPsych explanations end up being incredibly general. Obviously, there are so many adoring, wonderful step-parents who love their kids to bits. And even in the cases where step-parents are abusive, can you imagine a social worker coming to a home and saying, you see, your dad doesn't like you because you don't have any of his genes. So factors like mental health, family history, socioeconomic status end up being way more important because we can actually affect those things.
Oh, well, it's obvious about step-parents, therefore we don't have to prove it because everybody knows. And then you literally go and say that there's other factors affecting why single mother and single parent families have a much higher crime rate. I'm like, this. I'm going to get into when I get to the final conclusion of this, I will get into this in a little bit more depth and detail. But this is what the Manosphere has been talking about, specifically the men's rights section of the Manosphere is talking about the willful ignorance of feminists and the whole feminist sphere.
Conclusion.
Everywhere.
If you're talking to a man who refers to women as females, you have two courses of action. 1, run away, and 2, divert the conversation by saying that you think Christopher Nolan movies are overhyped. If you really want to include EvoPsych as part of your worldview, you should read the actual books and not listen to Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan.
Jesus fucking Christ. Joe Rogan is not an evolutionary psychologist, and he is not a member of the Manosphere. Third time now I've had to say that.
Read all the tearful evolutionary psychologists repeating over and again that their findings should not be interpreted as scripture. Adaptive is not to be equated with moral, right, optimal, attractive, and the like. Also, I recommend instead reading more evolutionary biology.
Oh, you mean the place about 20 minutes back or so where you brought forward an example of somebody saying how reading will change the structure and the connections inside the brain. Immediately after you brought up a photo of basically this stone woman, except of course that you failed to put two and two together and realize that the stone woman had been actually created something like, I think as much as maybe 6,000 to 8,000 years before the invention of writing. Yeah, your credibility on almost anything at this point is very suspect.
Much more legit.
Anya.
I want to finish with a quote from the wonderful bell hooks. To create loving men, we must love males. Loving maleness is different from praising and rewarding males for living up to sexist-defined notions of male identity. Caring about men because of what they do for us is not the same as loving males for simply being. In patriarchal culture, males are not allowed simply to be who they are and to glory in their unique identity. Their value is always determined by what they do. In an anti-patriarchal culture, males do not have to prove their value and worth. They know from birth that simply being gives them value, the right to be cherished and loved.
And, of course, she finishes off with bell hooks, and I did a quick look at bell hooks. Feminism and radical politics, yeah. She used what effectively is a radical feminist to tell potential men that are going to be watching this piece of shit video that she did what men should be like. Again, I can't say I'm overly surprised, but you know what? Having spent, what is it now? Oh my God, let me take a look. How much time have I spent on this? 13 hours to cover this. I'm not overly surprised. My last quote on this is that feminism is not for masculinity is not for feminists to describe, and is definitely not for fucking radical feminists like bell hooks to decide. Nor is it your responsibility either, Anya. I'll do fine figuring it out with other men without you around. You don't get a fucking say in what's coming up.
Guys. Thank you so much for watching. And if you did enjoy the video, please consider becoming a patron. Your support would mean a lot to me and help me make more videos. And here are the lovely patrons.
No, I'm not gonna become a patron. Stick to fucking movies, Anya. You're good at that. There's gonna be an afterword on this, so yeah. Stick around for the afterword. This was brutally difficult, and I'll get into more of it later. But thank fucking God, the video is over. I had to go through, this is the second take of the afterword on this video. The reason why is, the first one I did after being at the computer for 8 straight hours and was dead tired, and I didn't have my thoughts focused all properly. This time I am not. It's been about 24 hours since I touched this video, so I've gotten a little bit fresher now than I was when I did my first response. I have to start out by making a couple of points here. Number one, no. Taking 2 hours plus time and spending 13 hours debunking Anya Turnbull does not equate to being triggered. Anya Turnbull chose to engage in willful dishonesty. In fact, she engaged in willful dishonesty to the point where she went to great efforts to try to appear as though what she was doing was an honest dissertation, and made great efforts to make it appear as though what she was doing appeared intelligent. If somebody is going to take that level of time, set up the camera, have an assistant do close-ups and whatever, put the music in, make a supreme effort to try and make it look like this was a legit study of the manosphere, as opposed to just a post something up and just hope that nobody actually fact checks video. This wouldn't have been necessary. I've left other various individuals that have, women, feminists, whatever, who have tried to do hit pieces. I've let them off before without saying anything. Usually because it was pretty obvious they wouldn't. Anya made a serious attempt to make this look like it was a legitimate study. Okay, somebody who engages in that level of dishonesty needs and deserves to be called on it for multiples of reasons. The other one, no, I don't think I wasted 13 hours. Actually, more, given by the time I'm done this and by the time I finish posting this edit, it'll probably be closer to 15. No, I didn't think I wasted 15 hours of my life doing this. It was painful to have to listen to her. It was difficult to listen to her. And yeah, why did I choose to put this level of time in? Well, in case you didn't get it from the previous afterword, what I said before, Anya made put a Herculean effort into this video to make it look like she had done legitimate research. Probably much longer than I did in the amount of time it took for me to tear this thing down. But it is necessary to go in with the sledgehammer and the scalpel and tear this thing down completely, utterly, and absolutely. If I had just taken a couple points, or I had just done a little 5 to 15 minute video debunking a couple of her points, it would have been very easy for Anya or the people who support Anya to just go, oh, well, and I have seen this happen, by the way. They would have just gone, oh, well, this stuff, I can just brush this off. I can just leave this alone, right? Because the rest of the video is right. No, getting snarky or dismissive about one point is easy to do. When you have to start getting snarky and dismissive about having every single one of your points in a 30-minute video getting this kind of a treatment, yeah, you can't snark your way out of that. You can't just be dismissive about it. And the other part on this is that, yeah, oh, well, nobody's going to see it. Yeah, well, you know what? It's not necessarily about the quantity of people that see this video. It's more like the quality of the people who will see this. Mooncat, when she made her video last year, did not bother to answer her critics, did not address any of the factors that came against her. And the reason why she didn't do that is because her video got torn to shreds. Right? Anybody who was dumb enough, and I did literally see a couple of people that were actually dumb enough to suggest that Mooncat's video was a legitimate debunking of the manosphere. You know, anybody that was dumb enough to do that very quickly found out that that wasn't the case. This is why I did this with Anya, right? Because somebody out there at some point in the next year or two is going to try and use this as a legit source to say that the manosphere has been debunked, or that evolutionary psychology has been debunked, or Anya proved that evolutionary psychology is the basis of the manosphere when it actually isn't. And, it's necessary to have this out there as an example, just in case somebody tries to make the claim that Anya was actually doing legit research when she didn't. So, are a lot of people going to see this? Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to bet you, and I'm speaking directly to you, Anya. Yeah, I'm betting you saw this. I'm betting you don't have any answers for this. I'm betting that you're going to do your level best to either ignore this, or if you do somehow find the courage to actually address this, you will talk about me, my content, how I said stuff, my style, about anything other than the actual video itself and how you were debunked so absolutely, utterly, and thoroughly. It is necessary when you deal with a quote-unquote intellectual feminist to go in and you have to utterly and thoroughly stamp on it. You have to show that this was done. So they can't snark their way out of it. They can't play victim card. Oh yeah, and don't even try playing victim card. And don't try playing the misogyny card either. Anya, you chose to do this video. You know, the third part on this is that the 3, this really isn't designed. This video is not designed to be widespread. She put this on her alt channel. Most of her followers are either feminists or social justice warriors and are not going to get swayed by this. That's not what this particular video is about. This particular video is for if somebody is so stupid as to try to take Anya Turnbull's work and step outside of the little bubble that she's created for herself inside the feminist community, it's going to be absolutely and utterly torn to shreds. If people haven't already started, because trust me, I've let more than a few people know what Anya has attempted to do here. I might not be the only one that noticed this, and I did notice that you went to great pains to hide this video to make sure that it wasn't discovered. It did. And the reason why, Anya, that it did get discovered is because, you know, you made... Well, first of all, man, it's very clear you did not even do a lick of research into the Manosphere. Because if you had done a lick of research into the Manosphere, you would have known, because this happened very recently, that Ben Shapiro made an open attack against the Manosphere and got called for it. The stuff is still up. It's less than 2 months old. You're free to go and check. The other thing is, Joe Rogan has never openly declared himself to be a member of the Manosphere, Anya. In fact, what stuff that I've seen Joe Rogan talk about the Manosphere, he's actually very critical of it. So the fact that he has a lot of followers in the Manosphere that follow him does not mean that he's a member of the Manosphere. And as for Jordan Peterson, I know this because Jordan Peterson called MGTOW pathetic weasels at one point. He has been very critical of the Manosphere, and in general, he actually dislikes the red pill. Something, if you had bothered to do even so much as a lick of research, would have been able to find out. And you certainly wouldn't be calling Jordan Peterson our hero if you had known this. But you didn't know this because you didn't do the research. The other part on this is that, you know, you ignored all sorts of information, and in typical feminist fashion, you tried to make this about you. I told you about in the video where all the topics are. Most of them do not actually involve feminism. Most men in the Manosphere do not get up every day shuddering in fear because their ability to quote-unquote control women is somehow being diminished. This isn't about you, Anya. This isn't about feminism. This is about men redefining themselves. Something, and I said this at the end of the video, I'm going to say it again, you get absolutely no fucking say in. Deal with it. Now, as for some of the other stuff you did, the projection, the attempt, the projection, the attempt to tie MGTOW in with incel, I did notice, by the way, and this is something that is a very common trait with feminists, about how they will bend over backwards to avoid mentioning MGTOW, almost like it's like he who shall not be named, Voldemort. You know, it is the largest segment in the Manosphere, whether you believe it or not. Again, you would have found that out if you bothered to do the research. And most of the stuff inside MGTOW does not involve anything. Most of it really does not involve anything to do with women, only as far as the current laws and mores do not favor men in any way. And most MGTOW do not want to go back to the 50s. All right? So I could get into a lot more about this, Anya, but I don't want you to use this as some sort of torch that you're some sort of a victim or that I'm some sort of an idiot, because you know what, man, like no matter what you say about this video, no matter what you say about me, and by the way, if you do act, again, I want to say this again, if you actually do have the nerve to talk and to address this video, I'm going to say there's about a 99% chance that you will be talking about me. You will not be talking about where in this video that I'm specifically wrong. And I am not here to please you. The Manosphere is not here to seek your fucking approval. The Manosphere is not here because you've been helpful, that you've aided men in any kind of way, that you've bothered to address the issue in any kind of way. In fact, if anything, this particular video tells me that you are definitely not to be trusted in any form or fashion. I mean, at least Mooncat, who's actually a fairly intelligent person herself, had enough brains to at least try and suggest help. You didn't even bother to do that. So, in conclusion, this is kind of a hard one for me to sum up here, but I mean, I can confidently say that your video has been thoroughly debunked. I'm going to say with fairly solid certainty that there are going to be a few other people over the next few months that are going to do the exact same thing to you, because trust me, I have let enough people know that somebody else is going to find out about this, right? I'm not here to try and sway you away from feminism. I really couldn't give a shit what you do around your feminism, because I mean, what you choose to do is not in any way going to affect what I do. In any guys that you send over my way in the future, are either going to be defeated, converted, or they're going to run back with the tail between their legs, right? Because all you had throughout this entire video was projection, dishonesty, insults, red herrings, straw man. I could go on and on and on. So, good luck with your movie channel. I going to strongly suggest that you don't try and do another video like this again, because now that we're aware of you, we will be. I'm not going to say we will be watching, because I mean, knowing what you're like, you're probably going to try and misinterpret that as some type of a threat. You want to take on the Manosphere, though, especially if you want to try and take on MGTOW, you are going to get hit back. Is that clear enough for you? This is Naroki5. Like, subscribe, and I will talk to you later.